think of a problem, any kind of problem that has never been resolved in your life. Anything. And if you find one, just say, yes, I found a problem that has never been resolved in my life. Anything. Have you found one? Have you found one? Sit now, and now identify where the body reacts to that problem, where it hurts. Are you able to? Are you able to check? Now, give me now the first early recollection that comes to your mind. Anything of childhood, good or bad? You have one? Anything. Just, and you don't need to share it really quick. Remember? You remember me? Now, if you had a photo camera and you had to do one snapshot, look at that memory as if you had to do a photograph and take that piece of the memory that you would photograph and see what you would see on that photo. Can you see that? That whole memory, just take one spot of it. Yes. Okay. That is the core. You see, that core connects with that problem that has not been resolved. That core issue, and I'm going to share that now with you. That core issue is a part of your mind that has not yet shifted to healing, to forgiveness. So I'm going to explain that. I'm going to show you how this works. And I have been mapping those memories. And you may want to share a little bit since we're only two, or you may not want to. But the thing is that any illness, any problem, no matter what it is, and even the problem of those two ladies, have in their tail end one memory that has never been healed, never been discharged. And that memory is stored in the hippocampus, and the hippocampus stores the nuclei of that memory, and the amygdala, which is another organ in the brain, stores the feelings and emotions that go with it. And so through those feelings and emotions, we're constantly pulled back into that unhealed stuff. And that's a God-given, because we are to be pulled back in the unhealed stuff, because really the purpose is to release it through forgiveness eventually when we're ready. So I had an interesting case. I have done thousands of client studies with that, and I had an interesting case similar to the one you described when I was in Arizona, and I had asked 19 people to come that had had an illness to see whether in one session I could focus on that memory, and in this one session we could release some of the tension that such a memory would involve. And one of the first ones that came had a band around her head and had braces in her mouth. And so I asked her for the problem, and she said, well, she didn't know what to do. She wanted to become a vocational counselor, and she couldn't really use those braces. Anyway, when I looked at her and I asked her to focus on the pain in her body with the jaw, she said that her knees hurt. So I said, give me now the first early recollection that comes to your mind, good or bad. And this is what she told me. She told me that she was lying in bed as a little kid, and the raven came through the window and sat heavily on her chest. And she wanted to scream, but she couldn't. She felt all choked. This was the memory. And so I thought, oh my God, what do I get here? A memory of a raven. This is not anything of pain or hurt. And so I said to her, well, this may not be a memory, this is just a fantasy. And then she started to have a totally flushed cheek. And she said, no, it wasn't a fantasy, it was reality. And she told me that she had told her mother many, many times about it. And mother had even sent her to a psychiatrist, but nobody could help her. She had surgery, nobody could help her. And so I sat there and said, well, dear, couldn't it be that something else has happened to you, that this is not really a memory, that this is just what you made up to not tell your mother? And she sat there for the longest time. And suddenly she said, no, it was my uncle. My uncle came and he put me to bed and you know, was very caring. And then he abused me, sexually abused me, of course. So I said to her that I was extremely sorry about that, and that this was terrible, but that she could maybe now think of it differently. And I asked her whether her uncle was still alive, and she said no, he had died, he was run over by a tractor, and she was relieved, but mother was in terrible shape because she had nobody else to look after the farm. And so even then she couldn't tell mother because mother needed the uncle and she wouldn't be open. Anyway, she started to look wonderful in that session. Just somebody, as you said, somebody was there to acknowledge that she had been abused. She went home. 3 weeks later, she came without braces, without nothing in the mouth. She said, look, and it looked like a light had gone on in her mouth. And I said, well, have you told mother about me? And she said, yes, we forgave each other. We cried a long, long time in each other's arms. That was the point. That she was after saying to me, or after being clear about the memory, about the truth of the memory, she could then tell her mother, and mother listened this time, and they forgave each other. And of course the dysfunction went away. And so I have had hundreds of people, and I have worked with cancer and MS and whatever, that once they saw what was not yet forgiven in their life through that memory, they released that energy, and the body-mind was open to heal. So what I found on my in my work is that there are patterns that come up in those memories that are always the same. Whenever you ask a client for a memory, you always get that. And you always get a story of a break in the love union. Where is it? Yeah. You always, in the memories, get the story of a break in the love union. And behind that break in the love union is a void, and that is also imprinted in the memory bank, and that stands for all the existential loneliness and for all that which we have never released in our life, for all that emptiness that we feel. You always get a feeling of pain or hurt. You always get a feeling of fear. You always get anger, shame, or guilt, and you always find compensations. And within all that, the person is in a feeling of incessant inadequacy. And I've been able to find that no matter what, in all the memories that I've had, thousands of them. One of them, let's say, Susan's here. Where is she? Susan. Well, we have another one here. Another one with liver cancer. That, she told me she was one that died. She told me the memory. Dad was using his torch, and I was soldering something. I guess a piece came flying up and went down my shirt, and I still have the scar here somewhere down here. That's where the cancer started. I went hysterical. I got frightened because it was so hot. It was burning me. I started screaming. I started to cry. I started to really get frightened. He ended up slapping me. There you see. Instead of helping her, he kind of slapped her. To stop it, he sought to stop it, and he did stop it. That at this point, her voice almost faded. This was just one of the things that happened down there. Another abused one. She died soon after that memory, who had no way out to feel loved, to be cared for. She was slapped, she was burned, and probably other things happened. And so what I do then when I have the memory, and I'll ask you to later think of your memory, I ask for feelings and thoughts with each sentence. And in the feelings and thoughts that you get, you will find that which I have here with the colors, and I'll talk about that in a moment. You find that in those memories, what you find is that you have that hurt, that void, that hurt, that fear, that anger, and the compensations. And the trouble is that the compensations that people develop in response to those memories are always that which they hang on to later on because they're their life-saving belt. So with this client, she was always watching, she was curious, she was a nurse, she always felt shocked always in her. That was her life presence, her way of being in life. And she had always hidden dysfunctions that nobody could see in her and that would always be there. And so when we have been hurt, we later on go through life with all those conditionings from the hurt, and this is what gets us into being sick. Now, before I can show you how to change all these things, and the end of it is the forgiveness that we have already said, I want to bring Susan up here. Susan's memory, when I was about 5 years old, I was lying in bed, a black raven came through the window and sat heavily on my chest. I felt scared, and I tried to scream, but I couldn't. My throat was all clogged up, and the photograph was big black raven sitting on a bed. It is all dark. She gave me those feeling thoughts when I asked of the feeling thoughts with each sentence. We lived on a farm. I had lots of animals. I got to play with them. I was always scared in bed, more scared, immobilized. It hurt, I could not breathe, alone, helpless, immobilized, helpless, shocked. When I have all those feelings, then I can find out what is the condition of the body-mind that is attached to the memory, and it's with these that I work. And that shortens the time of therapy immensely, because I can ask the client then, where are these feeling thoughts still in your life now? When you look at the memory that you've now found within yourself, and when you ask yourself for feelings and thoughts with each sentence, then you will find that you have these kind of feelings and thoughts, and they will always tie into all of these conditions. And you will get a handout. It's these basic conditions that happen with every single memory that is attached to a problem. And once you have those, you have the core issue of the actual problem. It's not that there are other issues also, but this core issue is that which we can work with. And it just helps us totally to forget about that whole thing that psychology usually does, where we have to talk, think, and so on. We can look at compensations in life, look at fear, look at terror, look at pain, look at the emptiness, and then start to work on those, because we now know that they're still there. And it's these compensations and these pains and hurts that are zapping the energy system from working fully. It runs like a low-key stressor in the body, and it starts at early childhood when these unhealed woundings happen, and it ends when we finally release it through forgiveness, as you said. I have not seen one illness in my clients over the past years, thousands I've worked with, that did not have a low immunity in their system because of unreleased wound, hurts, pain, fears, woundings. And that did not have created compensations to hide all that. Because it's with those compensations that we hide that. And in your case, in that elderly lady, it would have been the promiscuity, that she was hiding the wounding that she had received from father. I don't know what it is in your case, but we build as children immediately early conditioning so that we do not have to stand up to that horrible break in the love union, whatever it is, because we cannot stand up then to it. And so we go and build these compensations. You can give you a very simple example. Let's say you wait for a phone call of a beloved, and you hear the telephone ringing, and you go to the telephone full of desire to connect, and you pick up the receiver, and the line is broken, and you just hear da 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 da, and in that moment you enter into that shock. You cannot avoid it because you have to shift biochemistry in your brain, and that is later on stored in the memory bank. And then what you do, you always try to find a way out. You may sit, smoke a cigarette, or you may go to the fridge and have a cold drink or whatever, or you may then start to phone around and become very aggressive, or you may have fantasies about how terrible that is, or that person has had an accident. We are not capable within our body-mind system to have any kind of break of the love union, any kind of cut, without reacting physically to it, and later on having that reaction stored in the memory bank, and it comes later on up as a compensation. And it's the compensations that get us into sickness when they break down. When they break down, we have overeaten, we have we have been alcoholics, we have been too aggressive. It is always that which gets us illness, gets us into illness later. So to show that to you, I want to give you an idea of how this works in the brain, because once we see what God has installed into our head, we get a feel for how we can change that from another angle. I'm going to talk about the limbic system here. This is the part in the brain that sits in the center of the brain. And we've got three major organs that have to do with pleasure and fear and aggression. That's the hippocampus, the amygdala, and the hypothalamus. Now what happens? The hippocampus is the organ where everything that ever happens to us that has some intensity is stored. And this hippocampus stores the nuclei, the basic parts of that happening. And it takes from the whole experience and forms nuclei and stores it there. And these are the basic belief systems that we have stored within us. Now this gives messages to the amygdala, and the amygdala stores the feelings that go with this experience. So this one only stores the facts, this one stores the feelings, and this one, the hypothalamus, reacts to those feelings and gives messages to the body to react to those feelings. Now, all three of those, this one, the amygdala and the hypothalamus, have pleasures and aversion centers. And it depends on how we think about that which has happened to us, whether we experience it as a pleasure or as an aggression. And the thinking goes on in the prefrontal lobes. Now, when a little kid is abused, and because it suffers pain, it cannot think about it in a loving way. Instead of then storing loving feelings, the little kid will store through the amygdala negative feelings, anything that has hurt it or where it felt really frustrated. And unfortunately, because we have these very ingrained experiences from early childhood when we have not been loved, that we are wounded and hurt later on in the active cortex. So in your case, if that woman that was abused had not thought that it was terrible and that your father was all the horror that he was, she would not have suffered for the incident. She could have, if she had been on a very spiritual path already, stored reacted with feelings of love for the father if her prefrontal lobes would have decided in thinking about love at the time. But it is not so much the abuser, the abuse, it's also that the abuser usually has a lot of guilt and a lot of hatred for the abuse because it doesn't act and it's very abusive. And so the child picks up the horror of the parent that is acting so badly to it, and therefore stores in its amygdala and then reacts with hormones in the body, stores negative feelings. And that's the fact of the whole truth about us feeling so rotten later is that when something bad is done to us, we act in return with bad feelings, except Jesus didn't at the end of his life. And so the memory acts according to those feelings, and the only act that will release those feelings is forgiveness. There is nothing else on earth that we can stop us to not having another remembering. Were you there yesterday when this other guy came and talked about how angry he is because the Indians do genocide right now, and how horrible and how we have to stop it? There is nothing that can give us the imprint of bad feelings into the hypothalamus when we see it in a loving light. God has given us this potential, this power. But we cannot act like that because immediately we react in self-defense with aggression, and that is stored and eventually becomes becomes that chain reaction. What happens when we forgive in the mind, what happens is that through the thinking, and you said it beautifully now, through thinking and the prefrontal lobes give us this chance to think differently. Through thinking differently about the act, what we do, we move the emotions and feelings that the amygdala has stored in the aversion center into the pleasure center of the amygdala, into the love pleasure center, and from there it goes through one of the serotonin, one of the neurotransmitters, to the septum. Now the septum is the only organ in our body, in our mind, that can only store love and pleasurable feelings. So God gave us an organ, a whole organ in the mind that only responds to love. And it is stimulated through the neurotransmitter serotonin and others, and the serotonin is synthesized along the digestive tract. So it's that gut feeling, you see, that synthesizes a neurotransmitter, and together with some others, that can in turn stimulate our love organ if we think, where is it? If we choose to think positively. The child has no chance to do that, but as grown-ups we have. And that thinking positively is the whole walk we do in psychology. In psychology, with a kind person there that listens to us, we are learning to gradually, step by step, think differently and look at things differently until we speak the words that we forgive. And these spoken words that we have forgiven, this old incident, this pain, these words change in itself the biochemistry in the brain. That we can now, today we can say that words like that, or if we take the words of the Bible that are great healing, as you said to that woman, you stand on holy ground, if we can bring that into the brain in a moment of distress, the whole brain gets revived. And what probably happened to that woman is that she had an incredible stimulation of her septum in the moment when she opened up to the love of God. So our task on earth is that we are learning to think positively and trying, as you said, to forgive so that the amygdala stores feelings in the pleasure and love center and not in the aversion center. And when we're in the pleasure love center, we have a totally different biochemistry in the body. That's why some people can heal cancer or whatever happens to them, because their immunity is kindled. There's an incredible amount of new immunity in the body when we can think loving and pleasurable thoughts. And it's not only that it's in the body, it is that the bliss of life or the zest for life stimulates those growth factors in the brain that have to be present when change and rewiring happens. So, going back to forgiveness now in this, what we can do, all of us that know about this, we can start to read good thoughts, think good thoughts. All the sensory organs are involved in that change. Is attached to the sensory organs. So whatever we choose to feel through the sensory organs, that is good, through the eyes, the skin, the mouth, even the sexual organs, if you stroke yourself, or you take in beautiful visions, or you eat good food, or you smell great smells, the more you can bring those wonderful feelings into the amygdala, the more it will move to the pleasure center. But you have to do it consciously. That's why so many therapists these days, they do body work, strokings, they have people look at wonderful visions, and so they shift gradually the system to eventually move to the loving and to especially stimulate the septum. It doesn't go without exercise and conscious decision. I had an interesting experience in '82 with Chile, a research group from the south of the American states, and they have done a lot of publications with Caroline Mus too, and Chile had publicized, where he had done a thermoscan of seriously depressed patients. And the scans were interesting to see because, the brain takes in glucose where it is activated, and so the glucose shows on the thermoscan as red and other colors, and the ones that were seriously depressed and had very low neurotransmitter had sort of interesting centers that were turned on, usually one, and I assume it had to do with thoughts that had never been released. Negative, terrible thoughts that were constantly reactivated. And then he did what we called the baby game with these clients. He stroked them, he did photo stimulation with light and stimulating the pineal gland with light. He gave them good food, he touched them, he was kind, they talked to them, they went for walks, they had sexuality. And within 2 months, all of those protagonists had their serotonin level up and could function normally. And when they did do more scans, the glucose intake was in the center of the being, right here like a mandala. So they had learned through that loving, kind, caring, talking, everything, to start to be centered, to not feel so erratic. And in that, the serotonin, who is the stimulator of the good feelings, has come up, and they were healed. I mean, he could just have done psychotherapy with them and had done forgiveness and released all those negative feelings in an act of will. But as you said, we cannot forgive unless we believe that we are attached to some higher love. Because if we don't know that we're loved anyway, deep down, we cannot outdo those horrible abuses of the parents. They are so ingrained in that system that we cannot move beyond. We have to have somebody that we know that loves us more. Sometimes it's a psychotherapist, but the psychotherapist is only a human and will leave again. Sometimes it's a husband. For some people, it's children. But for those that have neither a therapist, nor a husband, nor anybody, they don't believe that a God loves them truly more than they were wounded. The act of forgiveness cannot happen. That memory, those memories, those beliefs coming from the frontal lobes and stimulating the hippocampus are so ingrained that we cannot bring the energy beyond it. This is so ingrained that we cannot bring the energy beyond it. So that is why I think today we have a lot of spiritual movements, because in medicine we have failed, in psychology we can't really get the people better. We can always bring them to a certain level, but we cannot heal them right on, like I could do that with Susan, where bam, we're out of it, because she shifted to forgiveness in no time. That means she, in her mind, moved herself from the old conditioning with the abuse and the memories and the horror to the love center, to those two love centers in the brain. So I guess we will hear more about forgiveness in the near future, and it's good to know how this works in the brain. Coming back to your memories. You don't need to share if you don't want to, but just look at the feelings now that are in those memories that are attached to that problem that you've never resolved. Just take a little bit of time and feel those feelings. Can you see in your mind's eye that you could shift them into truly loving acts? That which is there in those memories? Can you see that, or is that still impossible? Can you see that yourself? No. You don't get it.
Well, I've tried to forgive it, but
you couldn't. Working through.
I don't know if it's really done.
Yeah, that's what you said. That was what you said with that other client. So what would you need so that you could know it was really done?
Well, I haven't seen my mom in a year, so
Okay.
I'm supposed to be going home to see her.
And you don't know if you see her this time,
No, I will, but
whether you have forgiven.
yeah, I think
Yeah.
I'll know better once I talk to her.
And you see, what will happen to you if you haven't forgiven is that there will still be memories in here stored that will react with the aversion center instead of with the love center. So what you can do is what Chuckles said. If you don't feel yet that you have forgiven, you can go back and remember incidents. And each single one needs to be expressed and maybe burned. That would help bring out every single part that is still in your mind as a memory. But believe me, there won't be many, because these memory nuclei are gathering a lot of information into one spot. So if you don't know that you've forgiven, you still have old memories in you that you have not released into that. Letting it go. And one of the best things is what Chuck said, is to write those memories down or those just bits. Look at them and either burn them or give them away to God or just dispose of them in your mind through the conscious decision in your prefrontal lobe. If you truly want.
No, I do, and I noticed that, well, other people actually noticed that since I've been trying to remember these things and forgive them and let them go, they say I look different.
Yes, the whole physical body changes because the biochemistry is becoming very different. And the serotonin level will go up. So it will in itself help you to let go of bad thoughts. And eventually, when you've done the whole cleansing, and there's never that much, there's only usually a few, you will not even remember the things. They will be gone. Even if you think of them, and for example, if you maybe have still got some of the memory in you, some of the story, what will be gone is the feelings. So if Susan now came back, it's that part. If Susan now came back and I said, do you remember what you told me years ago? She says, yeah, something about the raven on the chest or that uncle. I would ask her, how do you feel about it? She says, well, doesn't matter. gone. It's over. It's over. That means that she cannot go back to the feeling in the amygdala, to the aversion center, because once the connection is to the connection from the memory to the amygdala goes through love and kindness, there is no way she can go back to that. We know today that all the committed murderers and all the youths that act out aggressively have low serotonin levels in their physical body, which means that they cannot easily get rid of vicious drives or wild drives in the system. And the trouble is that these serotonin levels, they start to be ingrained very early. And when you know that little children sometimes react with vomiting, each other because he loves us first. And so for people that cannot move physically, mentally, emotionally, they have to find out that they are loved first, and that they are loved beyond the conditioning here that has gone haywire. You know, I was in an experiment where we even looked at newly born babies. They were about 2 weeks old, and one had a mother that didn't love the baby at all, and the other had a father that hated the child. And those little tiny children, they would not make eye contact with you. There was a nurse was asked to take care of them. They were born prematurely. They would turn their heads and would not look at you. They had already in the womb started to learn that they weren't loved, and so didn't make the connection. And so what this baby needed were physical touching, kindness, a lot of voice heals. Voice shifts us often from the aversion center to the love center and stimulates the biochemistry so that we can feel the loving openness. The hymns or church songs or anything that moves us beyond. So the major thing is that I want you to know that we do have those organs in the brain that will move us if we make a decision and if we have enough stimulation through books, through friends, through music, through words, through reading the Bible, knowing that we are beloved and that these ones that hated us have basically no say. They're only there to teach us that we can forgive. And that's a walk. It's a walk to go beyond that which is conditioned in us. And let's say those tiny little babies that were not wanting to do eye contact because they were totally within themselves and didn't want to connect anymore because they had been wounded. Over time, through the soothing voice of the nun, that was the nurse, through strokings, through nice, kind behavior, they will gradually start to connect again. And then they can start to connect in a loving way. And in that, we open up. Without love, without feeling connected, we cannot have the serotonin going to the second. Forget it. And that is the message of Jesus. The message of Jesus. Love each other as my Father loves you. And we all have to move towards that. When Gandhi spoke yesterday, he didn't speak about love. He just spoke about nonviolence, which is the first step, a decision to not retaliate. And that comes from the mom. Saying, I'm not going to hit back here anymore. I'm going to start to see whether I can see that in a positive light. The first movement It's not yet moving us to this piece, but what it does if we don't act anymore, what we do is we are not going to use the aggression hormones in the body to get us going and hitting back on the other. We're keeping them here, and that may sometimes also cause illness. That's carrying the cross. So we're having to learn to move towards loving, because otherwise our body won't make it, and the world won't make it. So finishing this now with one more overhead that I have devised. I used to do a lot of psychological counseling with all sorts of stuff, and I still do. But if I can now really touch the clients with love and telling them that they have a chance to move into the loving of their brain and show them this, then what I can do is move them right away into the loving part with all their negative emotions in the amygdala, where the void is that inner emptiness, that inner loneliness, the place where we face God. We have to be with God. Where the pain is, there's compassion. And one guy said it beautifully yesterday. He said, if the Israelis and the Muslims could sit together, share the pain and cry in compassion, they could heal. If you could sit with your mother and cry in compassion, just like Susan did, you would heal, and she would heal. But it sometimes takes a long walk to get there. Isn't it so, Chuck? Where the fear is, we have to pray and meditate, because the fear is so overwhelming in the biochemistry that we cannot just talk it away. So we pray and meditate, go to friends, let others be there, and eventually it releases itself and we can move. Where the anger is, we have to start doing loving deeds of kindness. Just as we now have to do loving deeds of kindness with Afghanistan. And really be merciful. If we want to love, forgive. We cannot just run and say, I forget. We have to do the deeds. Where all the compensations are, the drinking and the overeating and the alcoholics and whatever, we eventually put some humor into it and let it go and relax. We don't have to be so crazy about a new car or a new house or whatever. We can relax. And where we need to put new options into our life, it would be good to start reading and doing healing practices. So that one I've come up, that is a shortcut now that I do with my clients. Do not have to go through the whole psychological stuff anymore. And once we learn that we can do it, we do it. Yesterday somebody said, well, maybe these faculties have been atrophied. They haven't. They just have been forgotten. And now they're coming back up in spiritual literature. We truly do have the possibility to heal within our brain of anything, even the worst of things, even the absolute worst. But we have to know that we have been loved first. That is the essence of it. That somebody has loved us more than the damage. And if no human being is there, that God loves us more than any damage that we have suffered. If we don't believe that, we can't do it. We run after humans that will love us more. So I want to share a little poem with you at the end, and that's it and for today. So I'm going to stop now. That I wrote. God promised there will be plenty. What if I perish in pitch darkness, changed to past thoughts, past deeds cluttered with debris, reflected back from all angles of the hollow caves of my shortcomings. Obscure pile of manure. Or is it composed, decomposing, to hold my soul flowers in new visions of light? God promised there will be plenty. Jesus said, love me, follow me. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome. Yes. Okay. Now, what I have here for you, since I haven't spoken much about how to elicit this formative early recollection, as I call it, here you have I have written out that for another convention very in detail. And I know the mistake, yeah?
Sorry, that last handout, overhead you had up there.
The last overhead, yeah, it's in that. It's in the little thing.
There was a quote on the bottom. It's beautiful.
Yes.
But it wasn't complete.
Haven't I? Oh God.
And I just wondered what.
Oh, because I have wiped it out and probably not totally. Stephen Levine said when he mentioned God in one of the workshops, he said, I can mention God with no problem because I have no clue what it means.
Oh.
Yes, that's what he said. But I have decided I will mention God from now on. And this time when I wrote my abstract, I mentioned God, and I mentioned Jesus, I mentioned the Holy Spirit, and the abstract is not printed out in the program. Yes, but what I will do next time when I speak ever again, what has brought the people into my workshops in previous years, and I haven't done it, I have mentioned cancer, MS, and other serious chronic illness that I'm treating with my clients. And this time I have not mentioned those pullers. I've only said in my abstract, Christian way of looking at body-mind integration. And I think that just doesn't pull people. Christian doesn't pull people. And if I don't put the illnesses in that I work with, nobody really cares.
Well, it shows that it's body, mind, spirit.
Yeah. Are one, and that we have means within our body to move into a totally different biochemistry that happens when healing happens. I mean, you should see the cancer people I work with when they're healed. You don't even know them, recognize them anymore on the streets. The whole thing shifts. Yeah. Well, what did you want to ask, and then I'll answer both questions.
Well, actually, it was a comment. So
okay. The medical model starts to understand that there is more to our body than just medicine, and I get those brain things every 2 weeks, the newest research, and right now they're big in finding out that depression is healed with 50% with placebos and not with drugs. So there are, and when I have clients that suddenly heal themselves, doctors usually say they have made a mistake in the diagnosing of cancer. I've never had any doctor accept that it was a cancer that has been healed. Yes, of course.
Healing through prayer.
You know what the prayer does? It opens up to words in your mind, or even beyond words with the tongue prayer, that opens up energies that are geared upwards into believing that there is something that will heal you and connecting with it. You can even measure it if you do chakra measurings. You measure that energy.
No evidence whether it's because of what you believe is praying that's healed, or it's supernatural power that
No, there is evidence. There is. You can measure the chakra emission from the seventh chakra on top of your head. You can measure that, and if you pray, it goes very high up. If you don't know anything about that, if you have somebody sensitive in the hands, you can feel how high the emission goes. Yes, you feel it. You can feel it. I'm not going to feel it now, but you feel it, and you feel that it's like a burning thing. And you can do thermal scans, which will show that the radiation of your skin goes wow out. But you wanted to make a comment, Chuck.
Oh, well, I was just going to say, it reminds me of research I did on grief. And I ran across a study in University of Minnesota that took tears, grief of humans, and then fed it to rats. Tears that were innocuous, that were fed it to rats. The tears of grief poisoned rats.
Yeah, look at that.
Which says something to me, like what happens when we don't release our
Very true.
loss, our perception, or whatever, through tears, then we probably poison our body. And in our culture, tears are kind of reserved for sex, right?
Yes, very true.
Why didn't they
Yes, so true.
It just demonstrates how the mind.
Yes, very true. We also know, yes, you see the tears and the pee holds growth factors, and these growth factors are synthesized in the brain, and they have to be present when any tissue repair happens. And there are about 34 that they have now isolated, and one of those growth factors has been isolated in Vancouver. The one that helps two nerve endings grow together. And tear, saliva, and pee holds some of those growth factors, but as you say, if we cry and the grief cannot be released, it goes on and on, has a lot of anger in it, then it may also have adrenaline in it, and it does not heal. But basically, the tear glands are there to synthesize growth factors.
Well, it is. What we need to do is access it. Let it
That's
flow.
very true. Yes, very true. Yes, very true. Very true. Yes, very true. My grandmother, who lived up on a farm, usually when there was a wounding, she said, put some cow piss over it. And only now I know that cow piss holds growth factors to heal the tissue damage. Yeah. So we're only just starting with that. So anyway, I thank you for the audience. Thank you for listening. Well,